Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 13 wide receiver rankings for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my top 32 ranked wide receivers of the week, as well as explaining in depth into why I believe each wide receiver is at each spot inside the top 32. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 fantasy football championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I would also like to ask, if you guys are on Twitter and would like to follow me on there, to please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 13 wide receiver rankings. We begin at number 1 with the headliner wide receiver of today's video, and that is Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. Now, I understand that as of recently, the LA Rams offense hadn't looked like the same LA Rams offense that they looked like at the beginning of the season. At the beginning of the season, they were relentlessly beating down these teams, and as of recently, they've been on a losing streak. But if there was ever a game to get right, if there was ever a game for Cooper Kupp and this whole offense, Matthew Stafford, to have a bounce-back game where they just beat the ever-living shit out of a defense, it would be this week up against the Jacksonville Jaguars and Urban Meyer. This is such an easy matchup that I would be shocked if Cooper Kupp was not a top 5 wide receiver. And if I'm being honest with you, based upon how good the matchup is, if he is not a top 3 wide receiver, I really would be shocked. I love this matchup up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I understand that Matthew Stafford is slightly banged up, but at the end of the day, I still believe you should fire up Cooper Kupp this week with supreme confidence, and I love him this week up against the Jaguars, so he is going to be my number 1 wide receiver. At number 2, we have Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings going up against the Detroit Lions this week in Detroit. Now, I understand last week the Minnesota Vikings ultimately lost to the San Francisco 49ers, and the biggest blow wasn't even the loss in the game, it was losing Dalvin Cook. But when you're going up against the Detroit Lions, going from Dalvin Cook to Alexander Mattison doesn't really matter at all. Now, obviously, if you were to ask a Vikings fan, if you were to ask any football fan who watches the games, would you rather have Dalvin Cook or Alexander Mattison? Obviously, everyone's going to say that they would prefer Dalvin Cook, but it's not much of a downgrade, and it's basically the exact same thing up against the Detroit Lions. So I believe that this offense is going to be able to run and pass the ball fluently in this game, whether they have Dalvin Cook or not. I expect Justin Jefferson to be seeing a lot of work in this game up against the Detroit Lions. This may be a certified smackdown, as the Detroit Lions defense just is not very good at all. So I love Justin Jefferson in this matchup to finish as a top 3 wide receiver. So he is my wide receiver number 2 on the week. At number 3, we have Tyreek Hill of the Kansas City Chiefs going up against the Denver Broncos. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs as a whole, and definitely defensively, have really kind of turned the page on the season over the last couple of weeks and have looked so much better. This matchup up against the Denver Broncos, though, personally does worry me a little. The Denver Broncos dominated the LA Chargers all game long last week. Now, are the LA Chargers as good as the Kansas City Chiefs? A couple of weeks ago, I would have told you that the LA Chargers are better than the Kansas City Chiefs, but maybe now it's flip-flopped and the Kansas City Chiefs are better than the LA Chargers. But you can never doubt Tyreek Hill. All it takes is one fucking catch for this man to get 80 yards and a touchdown. That's just the deep ball potential that Tyreek Hill has game in and game out, and he is the perfect quarterback to hit him deep on those. Obviously, as you guys know, Patrick Mahomes, a pretty solid quarterback, I might add. So Tyreek Hill here up against the Denver Broncos. Not the most ideal matchup, but I'm definitely firing him up this week with a lot of confidence. At number 4, we have Stefan Diggs of the Buffalo Bills going up against the New England Patriots. Now, this was a ranking that I found to be very tough, because I wouldn't be surprised at all if this was a very run-heavy matchup, the Buffalo Bills versus the New England Patriots, a maybe low-scoring game, because both of these defenses on paper are fucking amazing. These may be the top 2 defenses in the NFL going toe-to-toe up against each other. So this is going to be a very interesting game, but at the same time, Josh Allen's number 1 wide receiver in Stefan Diggs who has really caught on as of recently. At the beginning of the year, it was like, damn, why did I even think at all that Stefan Diggs could be the number one wide receiver in fantasy football? But as of recently, I was like, oh, that's why I thought that, right? Because he's really fucking good. Going up against the New England Patriots, I understand that the matchup is tough, but he's going to be getting fed the ball in this game by Josh Allen, so I'm definitely going to be playing him, and I am pretty confident, even though the Patriots defense is tough. At number 5, we have Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Atlanta Falcons this week in Atlanta. Now, last week was the perfect game script, in my opinion, for what could have been a huge game out of Chris Godwin or a humongous game out of Mike Evans or even Rob Gronkowski, because this was going to be a very high-scoring game. The Indianapolis Colts at the beginning of the season were complete and utter fucking flaming dog shit, and recently they've been pretty solid. Instead of being flaming dog shit, they've just been on fire. They've been a great team, and I was like, oh man, this is a game script where we're going to see a lot of passing. Tampa Bay Tom Brady versus Mr. Carson Wentz. And while the Bucs offense was passing, when they were in the red zone, it was Uncle Lenny time, because the man scored not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 fucking touchdowns. So in this matchup up against the Atlanta Falcons, you may kind of paint the picture of, oh, that could easily happen again, and it wouldn't surprise me at all, but I'm definitely playing Chris Godwin this week, and I believe he has a much better week than last week's showing. So Chris Godwin is my wide receiver number 5. At number 6, we have Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers going up against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. Now, I just spoke about the fact that the LA Chargers offense just hasn't looked as good as it did earlier on in the season. And I honestly think I have cracked the code as to why that has happened. It's because the usage of Mike Williams has basically fallen off the edge of the earth, and that has hurt the offense. Now, we're seeing Keenan Allen basically see the exact same targets from week 1 to week 8 as we have seen from week 9 to week 13, or week number 12, obviously last week, because week 13 hasn't happened yet. But Mike Williams, his usage has fallen off the edge of the earth, and the team was looking really hot early on in the season, so maybe, just maybe, they want to give the ball to Mike Williams, but hey, Keenan Allen has still been very safe, game in and game out, so I like him here up against the Bengals, even though that Bengals defense absolutely fucking dismantled the Steelers last week. At number 7, we have Jamar Chase of the Bengals going up against the LA Chargers. Now, this game has all the makings of a shootout, right? We got Justin Herbert the pervert versus Joey B. This is going to be a very interesting game. I think that Jamar Chase has a huge showing here. Last week, kind of took the backseat to T. Higgins because T. Higgins had a great game, but at the end of the day, I still think that Jamar Chase could have a very good game here up against the Chargers defense. The Chargers defense, though, very bad against the run, not so as bad up against the pass, but I still think that Jamar Chase will be able to get it done. At number 8, we got another rookie wide receiver, and that is Jalen waddled away, waddle, till the very next day, bum, 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 of the Miami Dolphins, going up against the New York Football Giants this week. Now, the Giants defense looked pretty good up against the Eagles last week, but again, I'll make it known that the Eagles wide receivers basically fucking sabotage Jalen Hurts, dropping passes left and right. Jalen Reagor might as well be working at fucking McDonald's at the end of his rookie contract, because this guy fucking stinks. Jalen Waddle, though, has been just getting peppered with targets. Now, I understand, but Nick, it seems like Devontae Parker may be back this week. Does that mean that Jalen Waddle's usage is going to fall off the edge of the earth, Nick? Does that mean that you can't play Jalen Waddle? No, Jalen Waddle is still the clear number 1 wide receiver on this team. He's going to be peppered with targets. Why is that? Because he's got that connection with Tua Tagovailoa going back from college, and obviously still works in the NFL. They've got that LG, 5G, LTE fucking connection. I love him up against the Giants this week. At number 9, we have Deontay Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I know some of you, when you just read that I have a Steelers player ranked inside the top 10 at any position, you probably are confused. Because, last week, the Steelers offense needed some Viagra. They needed to get it up, and there was absolutely no way that there was Viagra being used in that game, because Deontay Johnson and the Steelers offense just was limp. They didn't do much in that game, but I do believe they could be in for a bounce back spot here. Typically, even when Big Ben is playing terribly, we see Deontay Johnson be immune to that and still have a great game, and I think this week that will be the case, even if Big Ben doesn't play all that well. To close in the top 10, we have Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, again, basically the exact same thing that I said for Chris Godwin can be applied here. I personally thought that this was going to be a very high-scoring game last week, which it was, where we were going to see a lot of touchdowns going to the wide receivers. Instead, Uncle Lenny scores 4 touchdowns. So obviously, things didn't go too well for Godwin. Things didn't go too well for Mike Evans. Antonio Brown, not going to be back for the next 3 weeks serving a suspension. So we're going to continue to see Chris Godwin and Mike Evans be the 1-2 punch in this offense. And I expect Mike Evans to have a much bigger showing this week up against a not-so-hot Falcons defense. Now we pivot to wide receivers number 11 through 20, but if you have ended up enjoying thus far, before we do break down wide receivers 11 through 20, I would like to ask, if you have ended up enjoying, to please make sure to hit that subscribe button as well as hitting that like button. I would appreciate it a ton. So at number 11, we have D-Hop, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals, going up against the Chicago Bears this week in Chicago. Now it appears that DeAndre Hopkins is going to play this week. It is not a 100% lock, but based upon everything that I have seen, it points towards DeAndre Hopkins playing. It also points towards the short king himself, Mr. 5'9", Kyler Murray returning, and I just personally believe that when DeAndre Hopkins is healthy, you have to fucking play him. He is one of those wide receivers that he could be on one leg and still dominate any defense, going up against the Chicago Bears defense that looked all right up against the Detroit Lions last week. This isn't the Detroit Lions. You're going from Detroit to the Arizona Cardinals, who are one of the best offenses in all of the National Football League when completely healthy, and that appears to be the case this week. I expect D-Hop to have a very solid showing in his return from injury. At number 12, we have Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings going up against the Detroit Lions in Detroit. Now, the funniest thing about Adam Thielen is that so much of his value hinges strictly on finding his way on into the end zone and moseying his way on in to scoring that touchdown. And it's funny because everyone always talks about that. But what they don't seem to remember is that this motherfucker basically just scores every game. He always finds his way into the end zone. And when you're playing a sorry-ass defense like the Detroit Lions, it is very easy for him to mosey his way on in, to waddle his way on in to the end zone. So I believe that Adam Thielen is an upper echelon start of the week, as he is a top 12 wide receiver. I love this matchup up against the Lions. At number 13, we have Mr. Scary F1, Terry McLaurin of the Washington football team, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas. This matchup has all the makings to be a high-scoring, tit-for-tat, back-and-forth fight between Derek Carr and Taylor Heinicke, and that is why I like Terry McLaurin so much in this matchup. I think that Terry McLaurin has the upside every single week to be a top 5 wide receiver. It all just depends on if Taylor Heinicke is looking good or looking not so good, looking kind of shit in the game, because we've seen some games where Taylor Heinicke legitimately looks good, and then there's other games where he's not so good. It seems like Taylor Heinicke is either very good, like looks really solid, or looks really bad. Typically, at least based upon the eye test, he doesn't look ever like an average quarterback. He either looks really good or really bad. I would say last week up against Seattle, he looked pretty solid, in my opinion. But going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, again, I think this could be a very high-scoring game, and I think there's a good chance Terry McLaurin scores a touchdown here, so he is my wide receiver number 13. At number 14, we have Darnell. Here comes the Mooney of the Chicago Bears, going up against the Arizona Cardinals. This is far from an ideal matchup, unlike last week up against the Lions, but Darnell Mooney is on a 3-game streak of over 15 half PPR points. This matchup up against Arizona, again, it's far from an amazing matchup, but I do think that even if Andy Dalton is the starting quarterback, that Darnell Mooney will be able to get it done in this game. I just continue to ride hot streaks in fantasy football. When guys are hot, when guys are on fire, when they're scoring all these fucking points game in and game out, I just believe you got to continue to just hop on the train and ride with it. So I love Darnell Mooney in this matchup. At number 15, we have Michael Pittman of the Indianapolis Colts going up against the Houston Texans in Houston. Now, Michael Pittman is ranked as wide receiver number 15, but he continues to disappoint. And why does he keep disappointing? Because the offense doesn't need Michael Pittman to succeed. All they have to do is just snap the ball to Carson Wentz. Wentz turns, to the right, hands it off. Turns to the left, hands it off. Gets the ball, dumps it to the right, dumps it to the left. This offense could just give the ball to Jonathan Taylor 50 fucking times a game, and they would win. Now, I understand, but Nick, they lost last week. I understand, obviously, they're not going to win every game, but the focal point of this offense is not Michael Pittman, it is Jonathan Taylor. They are going up against the Houston Texans this week. This could easily be a Jonathan Taylor takeover game where he scores maybe 2-3 touchdowns, maybe even scores 5 touchdowns like he did a couple of weeks ago. But then you can also paint the picture of this game where they're beating down on the Texans and Michael Pittman has 2 touchdowns. Why is that? Because he's the number one wide receiver on the team. There's also another narrative that's floating around in this game, and it's a true narrative. It's that T.Y. Hilton always dominates up against the Houston Texans. But even with all that said, there's still the positive. It's that he's the number one wide receiver going up against the Houston Texans. So is he safe? No. He's definitely risky. But the upside is of a top 5 wide receiver on the week, and that's why I have him ranked as my wide receiver number 15. Speaking of a little bit risky, we got number 16, Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks going up against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, over the last couple of weeks, it's like Russell Wilson forgot how to throw the fucking football to DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf has been doing his best John Cena impression, "You can't see me," and Tyler Lockett has been playing quite well. Now, Pete Carroll came out today and said that, hey, we need to get the ball to DK Metcalf. No shit, pal. No shit. And it's pretty up in the air. I'm very concerned about Pete Carroll going forward. Like, is this guy just lost everything, like, in his brain? Because he said this week when they signed Adrian Peterson that he's looking to win now. You have, like, 3 wins, pal. You're not winning anything. I am very concerned about what this Seahawks team is going to be past this season. Now, is that very relevant to this video? Of course, it has fucking no relevance to this video because we're talking about week number 13. Maybe we're discussing week 13 next season and this comes up. But Russell Wilson, is he going to even be the quarterback in Seattle next year? Let me know down below in the comment section. Do you guys think Russ is gone, or do you guys think they can Pete Carroll? I'm very interested to see what you guys think about that. So Tyler Lockett, again, definitely a risk, because maybe they just fucking pepper DK Metcalf with targets, but as of recently, the ball's only been going to Lockett, so I'm going to continue to believe with Tyler Lockett and rank him as my wide receiver number 16. At number 17, we have Hollywood Brown of the Baltimore Ravens going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Lamar Jackson didn't look very good at all up against the Cleveland Browns last week. He struggled mightily. This week up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you ask Steelers fans, they'd be like, oh, man, Lamar Jackson, that guy fucking stinks up against the Steelers. We own that motherfucker. And people say that, right? But then when you think about it, you're like, oh, he looked bad against the Browns. I betcha he tears it up this week up against the Steelers. Hollywood Brown is still the number one wide receiver on the team and does have that potential to any given week just take one to the house from 70, 80 yards, have some crazy play. So that's why I like Hollywood Brown. Definitely not as safe as he was earlier on in the season, but I do think Lamar Jackson bounces back this week. At number 18, we got Mr. T. Higgins, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals, going up against the LA Chargers, and between him, Nyuk, and Renfro, it was basically a complete and utter coin flip. I think T. Higgins is definitely a pretty big risk this week, but I think that the upside is huge considering we saw him really involved last week, and I think that is something that the Cincinnati Bengals have been missing all year long, was not really involving T. Higgins as much as they should have, and I think that, boom, they fucking cracked the code last week, and we see a lot more T. Higgins in week number 13. Number 19, we have Brandon Nyuk of the San Francisco 49ers going up against the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. This is a cupcake matchup, though the one drawback of Brandon Nyuk is that he's not Deebo Samuel. He's not as good as Deebo Samuel, but Deebo Samuel is gone for this week and maybe next week as well. But the drawback is that they run the ball a lot. Elijah Mitchell has been dominating, and he dominated last week. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he had 30 fucking points in this game, and then Brandon Nyuk was left out to dry. They also have George Kittle, who could have a big game. They also have Jawan Jennings, who was eating last week. So again, I am very confident in Brandon Nyuk, but there are a couple of surrounding pieces that do concern me in terms of Nyuk. Closing in the top 20, we have Mr. Hunter Renfro of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Washington football team. Like I said earlier, when we were talking about Terry McLaurin, I really do believe this could be a very high-scoring game. We just saw the Raiders play a really good game up against the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving, in which they won, and in which there was a zillion points scored. Darren Waller likely not going to be playing in this game, so they're going to pivot to Foster Moreau. So Hunter Renfro gets an even bigger tick up in this offense. He's the clear number one wide receiver, and they're without their other top-tier option in Darren Waller. So it's basically a no-brainer that Hunter Renfro should be able to have a very solid showing here. Now, I understand that the Washington football team defense woke up defensively last week and actually looked pretty solid, but that's because Russ isn't really all that good when he's banged up. So I think that Hunter Renfro should have no issue having a pretty decent showing. Now we pivot to wide receivers 21 through 30. And this is where things start to get really spicy. At number 21, we have Mike Williams of the LA Chargers going up against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. We talked about Keenan Allen at the beginning of the video, and what I said was true. They are not using Mike Williams the same way they used him earlier on in the season. Feed this fucker the ball, because it's very clear that you were winning at the beginning of the year because you were feeding the ball to Mike Williams. Now, I'm not saying that this guy is always going to be open, that this guy is just the second coming of fucking Jerry Rice or something. Of course, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that you got to throw the guy the ball when he's deep down the field. He's open, not every single time, but you got to give this guy the ball more. You got to design plays to give this guy the ball because your offense was doing better when you were giving the ball to Mike Williams and you were winning more games. Now, going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, again, the narrative of this being a shootout is entirely possible. My only slight worry about this game is how good the Bengals looked last week. That defense basically did a movie gag to Big Ben, meaning, have you guys ever seen one of those movies where it's like a middle school movie or like a high school movie, and the bully fucking takes the flag down and grabs some kid, fucking grabs his underwear, sticks the kid to the flagpole, and lifts him up to give him some type of ultra wedgie? That's what happened to Big Ben Roethlisberger last week. Is that going to happen to Justin Herbert the pervert? Probably not, but Mike Williams is definitely a guy I want to start. The upside is through the fucking roof. If this guy has a good game, he might strike for 20, 25, 30 points, but his down game is like 7 points, but I'm willing to take that risk this week up against the Bengals. At number 22, we have DK Metcalf of the Seahawks going up against the 49ers. Now again, Pete Carroll said that they are going to try to get the ball more to DK Metcalf, and great, right? Good to hear the coach acknowledging that, hey, they need to give the ball more to one of their star players. Makes sense, right? That's all good to hear. But at the end of the day, we need to see it. Just because Coach Carroll says something doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to happen on the field, that the on-the-field product is going to be the same as what he said. So I hope that DK Metcalf gets targets in this game, because if he doesn't get targeted, wide receiver number 22 was ambitious. Now, normally, if you rank DK Metcalf at 22, people will call you fucking crazy. They will say, oh, Nick, that's ridiculous. He should be a top 10 wide receiver. And I think he's that talented, but based upon what we've seen recently, based upon not even recency bias, it's just a fact. They're not using him at all. So I would definitely rank him much lower, and I don't really have a lot of confidence to start him, if I'm being honest with you. In the start-sit wide receiver video from a couple days ago, I told you guys to sit him. I have him ranked this high, but I have zero confidence in it. I just hope they give him the ball, and I assume that they will, but I'm still very worried about it. Number 23, we have Brandon Cookson it up in the kitchen, the cook himself, Brandon Cooks of the Houston Texans, going up against the Indianapolis Colts last week. Brandon Cooks found pay dirt and scored a touchdown. That's all great for Brandon Cooks. This week, going up against the Colts defense could be a much tougher matchup than up against the Jumbo Jets. But I like what I saw. I like that Tyrod was giving him the ball, so I will be a little bit more comfortable starting Brandon Cooks this week. At 24, we have Van Jefferson. 25, we have Devontae Smith, and I bring them all up here, and we should include Brandon Cooks in this argument because my confidence in all of these guys is pretty high, but the risk on all of these guys is pretty high as well. When it comes to Brandon Cooks, the risk is that the Colts just dismantle the Texans. The Texans are trying to crawl back. It doesn't work. Cooks just kind of fades away, and then they lose the game by a million, and Cooks doesn't do anything. For Van Jefferson, he should be the wide receiver number 2. Now, Odell is wide receiver number 30 in my list, Jefferson 24, and that's because there is a chance that Odell Beckham Jr. does not end up playing, and obviously, even if he's banged up, that would, in my opinion, move him down a peg to wide receiver number 30. But if Odell doesn't play, then I am very comfortable starting Van Jefferson as the wide receiver 2 up against the sorry Jags defense. Then you got Devontae Smith of the Eagles going up against the Jets in New York. This is an easy matchup, but it should have been an easy matchup for Devontae Smith to eat up against the Giants, but he didn't. Why? Because for some reason, Jalen Reagor is getting the ball a million times. Now, at the beginning of the video, I'm pretty sure I made a joke about how Jalen Reagor might as well be working at fucking McDonald's because that guy can't catch a football, but they just weren't giving the ball to Devontae Smith last week, so are they going to pivot off of trying to force feed Jalen Reagor for some reason to throwing the ball to Smith? I hope so, but that does slightly worry me, and Hurts being banged up also worries me as well. So again, all three of those guys, you could basically rank them all ahead of each other. Like if you said, oh, Devontae Smith, wide receiver 23, That wouldn't surprise me at all if you said Van Jefferson, wide receiver 23. And if you said Brandon Cooks, wide receiver 25, you get what I'm saying? You can jumble them all around, be it like you're playing fucking Yahtzee in your hand, throw them out, and they can end up anywhere inside of this top 25. Maybe not like the number one receiver, but you guys get what I'm saying. So that's kind of the tough scenario that we are in here. The risk plus the reward that could potentially be here. Like Van Jefferson, on his good day, could have 4 or 5 catches, turn those into 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. But then Brandon Cooks, his good day is probably a touchdown, but have a shit ton of yards and a bunch of catches. Devontae Smith, you definitely need him to find his way on into the end zone, but if they're able to pepper him like they peppered Jalen Reagor last week, then you're going to be very happy. So that was a very interesting kind of argument I had in my brain as I was making my rankings. So I wanted to bring that up inside of today's video. I hope that ended up making sense. Or maybe I just sound like a complete and utter fucking crazy person. But you guys already know that I'm a little bit crazy. So at number 26, we have Chase Claypool of the Steelers going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, this has nothing to do with fantasy football. Kind of does because it's about Chase Claypool. But Chase Claypool tells Mike Tomlin, hey, man, during the pregame warm-ups, before our games, they're playing music, we're dancing, we're having a great time. So how about we do that in practice? And Mike Tomlin basically, in summation, right, he had this nice paragraph quote. In summation, he said, what the fuck are you talking about? We're losing all these games. Why are we going to try to have fun in practice, man? We can't even win a fucking game, Chase Claypool, is basically what he said, and it was so funny. I don't know why that was so funny. Fucking TikTok boy Chase Claypool. It's just so funny to me. I don't know why. Like, what is this guy fucking doing? But at the end of the day, he is still very involved in this offense. Has his fantasy numbers been amazing? No. But that's why he's sitting down here, wide receiver number 26. But he has been getting the ball a lot more as of recently. So I'm pretty confident in playing him. At number 27, we have Eli Moore of the New York Football Jets, or the New York Jumbo Jets, I should say, going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I talked about this in every video, so you can just tap on the screen a couple times, fast forward if you heard this already. But I was so wrong about what this offense is with Zach Wilson versus with the other quarterbacks, because with Magic Mike White, with Josh Johnson, with even cool fucking Joe Flacco, Elijah Moore is able to eat. But for some reason, when you go to Zach Wilson, the number 2 overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft, basically everything fucking dissipates. It fades away. It's like it got Thanos snapped. Like Elijah Moore's value got Thanos snapped by Zach Wilson. Now, is Zach Wilson a bad quarterback? Like, right now, yes, I think. But could he get better? Obviously, right? He's only played a couple of games. But I don't know. Like, Elijah Moore, my confidence in him is damn near at the fucking dirt with Zach Wilson under center. 28, we got Jerry Judy of the Broncos going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. In Kansas City, Jerry Judy has basically siphoned away all value from Courtland Sutton when he's healthy, and he's also, at the same time, while he's siphoned away all that value, he hasn't been doing much himself. The way that this offense, the key to winning this game up against the Kansas City Chiefs, in my opinion, is run the ball gently down the stream. Now, Melvin Gordon's health is certainly up in the air right now. But even so, if he doesn't play, then Javonte Williams, you just hammer the rock with him. Same thing. It'll work just as well. And I think that's the key to success there. I think Jerry Judy will be getting the ball thrown to him a decent amount. The question is, will he be able to do anything with it? At number 29, we have Russell Gage of the Atlanta Falcons going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Terrible matchup, but at the same time, he's the number 1 receiver there. Now, maybe that is even a lie, because technically the best receiver on this team when Calvin Ridley isn't there is actually Cordero Patterson. Cordero Patterson's also the 3rd best safety on the team, apparently, because he's the reserve safety on the team. Russell Gage, though, has been seeing a lot of targets, and even when Matt Ryan has been sucking complete and utter donkey hog, not being able to throw the ball correctly, Russell Gage has still been performing. So wide receiver number 29. At number 30, we got OBJ. Odell Beckham Jr. scores a tug last week. For the first time in forever, as Elsa says in Frozen, I think that Odell Beckham Jr. could dominate in this game, but he is banged up, and he may end up missing this game. Plus, he's banged up, so that does worry me a little bit about his upside. And then to close out the video, we have wide receivers number 31 and 32. At number 31, we have Kendrick Bourne of the New England Patriots going up against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. This matchup is far from ideal. I really dislike this matchup up against the Buffalo Bills, but Kendrick Bourne has been just dominant inside of the red zone this year. You know what's funny is the NFL players don't call it the red zone. They call it something different, which I learned from Julian Edelman, which is just funny because as a fan, I always thought that everyone called it the red zone. But with that said, he's been dominating in the red zone, and That's great, and he's been scoring a lot of fantasy points. So with that said, while I don't love the matchup, he has been playing very well, so I would tell you that he is a top 32 receiver. And closing out the top 32, we have another receiver in this game, Emmanuel Sanders of the Buffalo Bills, going up against the Patriots. Again, not a great matchup. Both of these defenses are very solid up against the pass as well as up against the run, so this is kind of throwing a prayer up to the fantasy football gods, hoping they give a nice assist to you here. But besides Emmanuel Sanders, the receivers below him, I just wasn't very confident in, and I think that Emmanuel Sanders will at least see 5 or 6 targets in this game, which he could come down with 4 or 5 catches and have a pretty solid showing. So I like Emmanuel Sanders as a top 32 wide receiver. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button, as well as hitting that like button. I appreciate it a ton. I love each and every single one of you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day, and as always, guys, good boy.